So it ends like it began for me, and all that we can
Hello, viewers and listeners around the world. Welcome, everybody. This isn't really in the bin, but I always kind of feel like I need to do the in the bin start. I always feel like I need to do the in the bin start. I don't know why that is. I just feel very married to it or something. Live from the International Debate, Rhetoric, and Argumentation podcast facility located in lovely, livable Rocky Point, New York. This is In the Bin, your number one stop for news and views on rhetoric, debate, and argumentation. The number one and only podcast in the world to focus on rhetoric, debate, and argumentation. I am your host, Dr. Steve Yano. Hey, everybody. Hello. And as you can see on the opening screen, Wolf Club, All We Live For. Yeah, it's a great opening song, I think. I don't know, I miss our old opening song from long ago. Maybe I should bring it back, but that was kind of the end of an era, you know? I don't really feel like I need to go back in time and do anything, from way back in the day, you know?
Oh.
Those days are over, but In the Bin has an extensive archive. Maybe I should post that. Anyway, welcome. This video is titled, The Beginning of a Series of Bad Takes on Debate. And boy, there are so many of them. Since Charlie Kirk's assassination, we're calling that an assassination, yes? Since Charlie Kirk's assassination, I think a lot more, as a side note on that, I think a lot more is going to come out in the trial. That yes, the shooter, the alleged shooter, if he is the shooter and he is guilty, everything seems to be indicating that Tyler Robinson is the shooter. But I do want to say alleged. He hasn't been convicted of anything yet. In that trial, I think it's going to come out that yes, he did want to kill Charlie Kirk. And yes, it was for political reasons. But then we're going to have this debate about what are political reasons. Is Tyler Robinson capable of holding a political position that we would consider rational? And just looking ahead, I don't know if this guy is somebody who we can determine to be rational, or somebody who we can determine knows what he's doing. I think he's got a lot of issues. It might not be the case. He might be fully, totally cognizant and be like, yes, I wanted Charlie Kirk dead, da-da-da. But anyway, that's a whole other video. This video is about bad debate takes. And since that happened, everybody has been making incredibly bad takes on debate. The first and the most prevalent is Charlie Kirk was killed. He was an excellent debater. I don't know if people understand what debate means. I don't think that anyone has a good working theory of that. You could argue, and I think I'm convinced by this, I would argue Charlie Kirk was killed doing what he loved to do and doing what he thought was right and what he thought was for the best, which is going out to audiences of young college students who Charlie Kirk believed were being manipulated into buying a bill of goods about how they should want to live, how they should want to experience life, how they should want to exist in community. And he thought they were being sold a bill of goods, and he wanted to correct the record. And so he was using freedom of speech and his ability to speak in public quite freely, and his lack of any kind of, I mean, maybe you could argue he probably, should have dialed it back a little bit, but any kind of hesitation or any kind of sense that he was going overboard or saying incredibly offensive things. I think he realized that because several times he defended that. But he's not doing that. He's persuading people. He's trying to convince people. He's making arguments to people to try to persuade them in a traditional rhetorical style, traditional rhetorical method of saying, hey, everything you think is wrong. Here's what I think. Now come up here and ask me questions about it, and I will answer those questions. It's not a debate. This is not a debate. He's not debating. And if you think about it, we have to have a difference between these terms. We have a difference between these terms. Debate, argument, persuasion are not synonyms. Right? You can do a little thought experiment yourself. If I'm arguing with somebody, am I trying to persuade them? I might be trying to prove them wrong, but that's not going to convince anybody. Right? You approach somebody who has a different political view than you, and you say, hey, look, these people are lying to you, and you're buying it. That's not persuasive. That's not convincing. That's just sort of starting a fight. Because if you do that, everyone's like, no one's going to come to your side because they're like, oh, I'm a rube. Nobody wants to be a rube. Nobody wants to be called out as a fool. Nobody wants that. Big shocker. Nobody wants to be called dumb. Nobody wants to be called foolish or nobody wants to be tricked. This isn't going to work. So rhetorical sense of persuasion, a rhetorical sense of argument is about connection. And a rhetorical understanding of debate has nothing to do with any of this. A rhetorical understanding of debate is that we are putting our best possible perspectives out there, limited as we are, and having them clash to see what comes out. And usually what comes out is of a debate is not anything that anybody said. Nobody wins a debate. Debate can provide wins. Usually the best debates provide a win-win because everybody kind of gets something out of it. Even if you came with an axe to grind and you wanted to see the bad guys lose, that doesn't really happen. Oftentimes we're like, what the hell? What were we talking about? What the hell? These are like what good debates should be from the rhetorical tradition. And debate should have things like a topic, an agreed upon topic that people research beforehand and then engage. Charlie Kirk wasn't doing any of that. I think people wanted to catch him flat-footed, but this is traditional argument. This is rhetorical argument. This is rhetorical display and public argument, which I think is a different thing and has its own theory than debating. Debating is an exchange on a topic where people are bringing their best possible arguments. And Charlie Kirk didn't do that. He never came forward at any of these events and said, here's my case. Here's what I believe. Now, come and prove me wrong. He was just like, no, prove me wrong. And people come up with random topics and come up to him with random topics, all kinds of random things. So anyway, there's a lot, after his death, there's a lot of people coming out and being like, debate is important, and then they have the worst imaginable takes. So I was sent this one today. Let me see if I can get it up there. I don't know if I can. Let's see. Yeah, this one was sent to me today. We'll walk through this, and I'll kind of explain why I do not think that this is a good understanding of debate. This is by Carlo Calleja, who's posting from Malta. Whoa, Malta. I wish I was working in Malta, but I have to work at a terrible, golf course storage shed of a university. Pretty bad. I don't, let's not get into it. I don't even understand why I try, but I do like doing YouTube, and it affords me the ability to do that. Okay, so let's look at what this is. Debating debates, from bitter to better debates. Okay, I already appreciate the sense of a title. Here's someone who's Carlo is going to try to argue that we should have better debates. And I, of course, am in favor of that because I always want to improve debate. This is what I study. This is what I write about. This is what I'm concerned with, is what debate looks like and what it should look like, and how do we teach people how to debate. And it is a slippery term. As a rhetorician, I'm not a philosopher, I'm a rhetorician. As a rhetorician, I'm a lot more interested in how people use a term and how a term has slippage and moves around quite a bit, rather than trying to get an accurate understanding of the term. But most understandings of debate do not differentiate it from disagreement, do not differentiate it from argument, do not differentiate it from persuasion. And I feel like some differentiation is necessary because we do have a sense when we're in a debate versus when we're in a discussion, right? We have a sense of that, but it's not theorized very well by people who should be looking to the rhetorical tradition, rhetorical scholars, and people writing about debate and argument in order to have a better take on these things. Carlo will do none of these things. As a spoiler alert, Carlo will do none of these things. But he seems to have a sense of debate. But what is it? As I write, the world is reeling from the despicable killing of Charlie Kirk, the U.S. conservative activist and podcaster. Since I had never heard his name before, I looked him up on YouTube and found that he was known mostly for engaging in discussions with college students. I think it's a fair treatment. But it's interesting that Carlo had no idea who this guy was. It shows how incredibly American Charlie Kirk was, because I assume Carlo's not an American. I assume that's a safe assumption. He's in Malta, of all places. God. Carlo, can I come to Malta and we can work together on making debate better?
Oh.
Could we do that? Please write me. Kirk would first participate in a panel discussion, and the students' viewpoints that diverged from his would come to the microphone and challenge him on some point or another. Okay, this is just rhetorical display. This is not debate. This is a very famous kind of rhetorical display that was started by the sophists in ancient Athens, who would say they would do different things as a way of attracting students, as a way of selling something, selling a course in argument, selling a course in debate. You have to remember, in the ancient world, I don't want to talk too broad brush, but in ancient Greece and ancient Athens, there's no formal schooling. You go and find the person who knows how to do the thing you want to learn, and then you study with them. You pay them. So famously, there were different sophists who did different things. Hippias said, I'm the sophist who can show you how to turn trash into treasure, quite literally. You can take things people have thrown away. You never have to buy anything. You can make your own clothes. You can make your own items at home. This kind of like, it's funny his name is Hippias because it sounds very hippie sort of thing to me. Then there's Prodicus, who said, if you give me two different words, I will show you two synonyms. I will show you how different they are. I can show you how to define them. And people would throw him different words, and he would, through a beautiful speech, separate them. He was most noted for a speech he would perform to paying audiences called The Choice of Heracles, The Choice of Hercules, where Hercules, it's a fantasy where Hercules as a young man understands he's a demigod, and he wanders away to the woods to think about what this means. And he's approached by Virtue and Vice, both women who come to him. And Virtue and Vice offer him arguments in the form of a debate. They take turns, and they make their arguments and respond to each other to try to convince Heracles to either walk the path of virtue or vice. Then there's the most famous sophist of all, Gorgias. Gorgias, he would have the most open Charlie Kirk style of all. He'd give a speech or a lecture or a performance, and then afterwards he'd say, I will stay here and answer all of your questions to your satisfaction. And Charlie Kirk kind of took a vibe of that. I don't think Charlie Kirk would stay there forever. I think he had like limited time. He's a busy guy, and he had lots of other responsibilities with his organization. He would stay for many hours. He would take a number of different questions for a certain amount of time. But there was no, as far as I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, there was no screening process, no filtration, no attempt to select the dumbest people or the most liberal people or anything like that. Anyone could step to the microphone and ask questions. But this is a sophistic, rhetorical act to try to attract students, is where it comes from. And then in Roman schools of rhetoric, this would be the display speech, which became so incredibly formal over the history of Rome, where teachers would show that they could speak as well as Cicero on whatever topic they'd prepared. And they would show students how beautifully they could speak, how well they had mastered Latin in its most complex forms. And that would be like, students would be like, man, I got to study with that guy. I'll be the king of the Senate. Toasty. So I can study with that bro. Bro, teach me some rhetoric. Toasty. And that's kind of the way it went. I don't think they really... How do you even say bro in Latin? Does anybody know how you do that? Anyway. Incidentally, the style deployed reminded me of another recent initiative taking place in my home country, Malta. Oh, so he's a Maltan guy. Okay, this is getting better. Carlo, I know I'm going to drag you here, bro, but you really got to reach out. We got a collab. Bring me to Malta. I'll set up a better debate than whatever's going on there. I'll set it better. As in Kirk's case, a number of Gen Z youths take turns to challenge the views of a person on a particular subject they all disagree with. The first and only episode so far dealt with abortion. Okay, this sounds like a ripoff of Jubilee. Jubilee is a very popular YouTube channel that will be like one atheist versus 30 Christians, one black feminist versus 30 MAGA white men, or whatever. And it's really kind of a performance of a kind of argument that is, I don't want to say masculinity, but it's a performance of a kind of civic body that's very attractive because of its toxicity. It's a performance of this kind of debate. I don't think it's debate, but people would call it. He's calling it that. Hot button debates. it's a kind of a performance that's somewhere between the chess master, the grandmaster Simul in chess. I can play 30 opponents at once and beat them all, which is an indicator of a grandmaster's rank in chess, and a combination between a kind of a performed civic toxicity, where the perfect kind of democratic citizen doesn't need to research, doesn't need to do notes. They're right in their heart, and it comes out and they speak the truth, and it dissolves like a spray of acid from the alien movies, a spray of acid that dissolves everything. So you cut me, you get sprayed with this acid, like in the Alien films. It's a very disgusting body politic model that's being shopped here. In this hot seat. What garbage. Jubilee is garbage too. Don't watch that stuff. Don't watch it. It's garbage.
Oh.
I know it's fun. It's sort of like watching somebody get beat up. It's like watching a video of there'll be like disturbing graphic content ahead. This guy gets jumped at a club and gets the shit beat out of him. People will watch that because we're gross human beings, but we shouldn't be watching it. It's not good, especially when we're looking for models of how to conduct civic debate in a democratic republic. Jubilee erodes that. Jubilee says the best kind of models are people who don't back down, don't compromise, don't do research. They know what's true, and they know it to a point where even if you score a point on them and cut them, it's going to hurt you because the acid's going to spray back on you. Absolute trash. Toxic body politic model. But it's attractive. It's attractive because everybody wants to be the chess grandmaster. But in that, it's reduced to a skill, right? Chess is playing a skill. It's an art. It's a skill. It's a sport. But it's reduced to a skill. I can do this because I have such command over the possibilities of the moves. But in civic situations, in politics and stuff, there isn't a limit of moves. There aren't things pieces can do or can't do. That's always up in the air. The thing that frustrates debate students I have is that you can always debate the rules. Yesterday in class, we were doing that, and they were having a lot of trouble going to that meta level of what debate should be like. They're like, no, I can take on anything. Should you have to take on anything? What are those obligations that make debate and cord it off from other discourses? I found the whole discussion rather distasteful. Oh, good. Okay. Thank God. Carlo, good job. Several inaccurate claims were made on both sides. Sweeping statements were done throughout, and several points throughout the debate, the attacks turned personal. Right, because what this is a kind of a flourishing and a kind of a persuasion. It's for the audience, not for the opponent. It's for the audience who already agrees to say, yeah, they really got him. They really got him. It's like a sport. It's like turning argument, debate, or civic political discussion into a sport. And after Virtue, Alistair McIntyre, oh God, insisted that debates on important political issues are doomed to fail because of the incommensurability of rival arguments. By this, he meant that different moral paradigms, insofar as they have different ends in sight, can never be seen to lead to any agreement. Okay, that's kind of weird. I'd like to go back and check that. Maybe I'll do a Alistair McIntyre. I do like After Virtue. I read it as an undergrad in the 90s. I thought it really opened my eyes. But rival arguments are not incommensurable unless you're a philosopher. If you're a rhetorician like me, there's always a way through. So aporias, right? Aporias, which I think is what we're talking about here. An aporia, a philosophical disagreement that cannot be worked through, for a rhetorician becomes a time to go to the commonplaces. Let's reach outside and find connection, agreement, things that we can agree on to move the debate forward if we want to. Sometimes it's fine to end with disagreement because the goal of debate might be that everyone thinks a little bit harder or thinks a little bit differently about their position, and they arrive at new arguments. It's called rhetorical invention. I don't really understand what he's meaning there. I guess I'm not familiar enough with McIntyre, but I should go back and do it, and then I can do McIntyre and argument. That could be a good debate series. Maybe you'd like that. Maybe you would like that.
Oh.
In the same vein, Michael Sandel, who wrote that great book on justice, this is actually a pretty good book. But the attention to him in TED Talk world and the amount of people who attend his lectures really show us how impoverished our rhetorical education is. In a civic society that valued rhetoric as a foundational art or practice, of citizens in a democracy, we could all form our own incredibly beautiful articulations of justice, share them with each other, and argue with each other about them, or even hold debates on them. But we do not value that. What we value is the truth and the facts and being right. That's not good for democracy, because that will always be held up over someone's perspective, over someone's narrative, over someone's life experiences, will always be thrown away. So we'll say, well, it's just true. Sorry, go cry in the corner, bro. It's just true. The facts don't lie. And this is the way our debate sounds, because we don't value rhetoric. So it's no surprise to me that Sandel is so popular, because he's taking a much more creative and constructive view of what justice could be. And we don't have the tools to do that. Nobody's taught how to do that. So everyone's like, this is a marvel. It's almost like in Athens going to watch the sophists of old give long talks about very difficult questions, being like, wow, I wish I could do that. And then the sophists being like, oh, but you can. For $39.95, you can come and learn the rhetoric with me, Gorgias. Oh, yeah. All right. Michael Sandel famously described debates in contemporary political life as shouting matches and ideological food fights. Yeah, these are not debates. Those are what we call shouting matches and fights. That's what's called debate, so I agree with him. As a way forward, Sandel advocates for asking the deeper questions underlying issues that fall on one side or another of the culture wars, and the common commitment to seek the good instead. Or just seeking understanding. You don't have to seek the good. He's a philosopher too. It's a problem. These philosophers are a lot of trouble, aren't they? Lots of trouble. So rhetoricians would say, let's seek understanding. Let's seek agreement. Let's seek further understanding of how we've come to these positions. Those can be the goals of debate too. But often the goals of debate are, one of the things that separates debate from argument might be the idea that we bring our best possible case forward for an audience to learn about the controversy. And a lot of times people leave a debate with less certainty, and that's a great result. Why do they leave with less certainty? Because after the debate, they start to question their own view, and they're like, the speaker said this weird thing. I'm going to go research that. I need to go look that up. And it turns people towards these deeper questions, asking deeper questions. People don't know how to frame deeper questions right away. A debate can help do that. And debates, I think that both Sandel and McIntyre make the mistake of thinking debate is a truth-seeking instrument, that it's a humanist methodology for finding the truth. No. No, debate can be a lot more than that. And there's so many better ways to explore philosophical truth than having a debate. And debate is much more of like an opening or a kicking up of dust and confusion, more than a rendering of fat, or a rendering of all these things into like a broth or whatever they imagine it is. I'm not a philosopher, so I don't know. But why am I going to cooking metaphors again? What the hell is wrong with me? A brief genealogy of debate. Okay, this is going to be funny. Brief genealogy of debate. Give me a break, dude. Come on. Debate has always had an important place in the history of Western civilization. Oh, good. An undergraduate paper. Provided it was conducted well. What? It's always had an important place even when it was shitty, dude. It's worth mentioning here some notable examples. I can't wait. I wonder if I'm going to vomit in the middle of this video. Socrates is known to have engaged in dialogue with others in such a way that allowed him and his interlocutors to discover another aspect of the truth through a dialectical process. It's not a debate. He even used the word dialogue. But what's interesting here is he doesn't cite or even go into anything on the eneleikos, which is the Socratic method known to philosophers. I assume Carlo might be a philosopher. I don't know. Known to philosophers of the ancient world, at the eneleikos. Am I pronouncing it right? Maybe not. It's a word I've only read, and my ancient Greek isn't that great. Through a dialect, this is true. The dialectical process is very important, but a dialectical process is not a debate either. In a debate, people take grandiose, full-on sides to test the power of the arguments, the influence of the arguments, and audiences benefit from that clash. They benefit from that clash because then they hear things and they're like, oh, that's something I believe, but that articulation at a very strong point doesn't resonate with me. So maybe I need to investigate deeper the questions that have brought me to this political position. Neither he or any of his interlocutors claimed to have grasped the truth fully a priori. Well, Socrates thought he did. I know nothing, right? That's an a priori truth. I know that I don't know. They always departed from their own personal conviction. I mean, I kind of feel like if you think these dialogues are honest conversations, but Plato had an axe to grind, didn't he? He had a model of what's behind a good political system that he thought Socrates was emblematic of. And I certainly don't. Socrates never departs from his personal conviction, but all his interlocutors do. Oh, Socrates, you're so smart. Oh, Socrates, you're so wise. Oh, Socrates, you're so... You're so right. I did contradict myself. Silly me. I can't be you. And Socrates always has a plan. You know, it's sort of like like Socratic method in law school is well named because the professor has a plan. They're leading people down a primrose path, and Socrates do the same thing. Because Socrates did not come in with the attitude that he was going to change his own mind about sophistry. He's always going to oppose the sophists because the sophists are not engaged in the proper inquiry into life that he thought existed. So I don't know if we can give this a lot of credit because I don't think Socrates was open to that. And in so much as like Charlie Kirk was never open to being like, you know what, you're right. I think I'm going to become a left-wing radical today. He's never going to do that. He thinks he's right. And he's engaging in this rhetorical exercise. And so that's dialectics, we could say. Or that could be a dialectical rhetorical hybrid where they're not honestly, I don't think Charlie Kirk is having honest dialectical exchange with people. I think that what he's doing is trying to prove he's right, generally through the method of making the other person unable to answer him, which is the classic fallacy of ad ignorantum, the ad ignorantum fallacy, or appeal to ignorance, as we call it in English. But the ad ignorantum says that just because your opponent can't prove you wrong doesn't make you right. Your rightness has to come from other sources. The correctness of the argument has to come from other sources. In rhetoric, we would say it comes from the audience, not from the lack of your interlocutor being able to engage with you. However, for lots of rhetoricians, this is a powerful way to get the audience thinking, you know what, he's got a point because the other guy couldn't really respond to it. Right? Hence why presidential debates are popular among people, among party loyalists. Oh, they really couldn't answer that. Are often arriving at a conclusion that was significantly different from their initial premises. Well, significantly different from the interlocutor's premises, but not significantly different from where Socrates started, because we know what Socrates is about. Although not in actual dialogue form, in his work Sic et Non, Peter Abelard presents 158 questions that he answers through contradictory authoritative states of different early Christian writers. That sounds cool. Never read it. I don't know anything about it. For example, see entry 150, that adultery is the worst of all sins, second only to heresy, and the contrary. First, he quotes Clement's letter to Jacob, and is it Bede? Bede the Venerable? That's a cool name. I don't know anything about theology, but Carlo obviously knows, so he's pulling examples from what he's familiar with, and also what the audience of Catholic theological ethics is going to pull from. They're going to be familiar with these writers. I'm not a theologian. Who answer in the affirmative. And he quotes Ambrose in his work on virgins, who gives a contradictory response. These seemingly opposing claims provided students with the opportunity to see various issues from different perspectives, and in so doing, to appreciate the depth involved in reaching a resolution that's closer to the truth than to the original claims. So that's a good philosophical truth exercise, as you take different perspectives and work through them and compare them. Again, not debate, but an excellent rhetorical device to show people, okay, here is this question. What is the worst of all sins? Here are some big thinkers you respect on it, and here's my intervention into that. Now, that's highly rhetorical, that's persuasive, that's argumentative, but this is not a debate. A debate would be so one of the things about debate is you don't even really have to be that versed in a topic in order to participate in a debate on it. You just have to be able to take a position you think is the strongest, and then it helps you learn how to create your own responses, not, which responses are correct. It will help you kind of look at resources and say, well, this source is better than that one. That's pretty good, I would say. I think that's a great teaching method, great pedagogical method, and a great method to investigate things. And also this book, 158 questions, Sic et Non, 158 questions that he looks through different contradictions, is a very cool thing that we might call like similar to Aristotle or Cicero's Topics. Something you could run theological arguments through and really kind of get a sense of what I could say on this topic. It's sort of like a creation of rhetoric kind of guide. I don't know if that's the intent of that book or if how the book is read in theology. But Abelard seems to be pretty rhetorical in his thinking. But, hey, if you're involved in a religion that proselytizes, you probably should be pretty rhetorical in your thinking. You want to attract people to your beliefs and you want them to agree with you. Why not? I think it's great. 2 centuries later, in his Summa Theologica, Aquinas elaborates on Abelard's methodology by engaging contrasting voices to then reach a resolution. James F. Keenan helps us understand the contribution that Aquinas made to how debates were conducted. Now we're going to quote Keenan, who I assume is a big Thomist philosopher, big stan of Aquinas. No shortage of those people where I work. Prior to giving an answer, Thomas presented a series of objections or considerations from other authorities who, generally speaking, often seems at odds with the reply that eventually Thomas provided. Now, this is a classical Roman rhetorical. It comes from Hermagoras at the end of kind of Greece moving into Rome. Hermagoras kind of comes up with the method of stasis and also the method of organization that we get from the ancient world, which was perfected over time by the Roman legal practice and Roman political philosophy and discussions about what does it mean to be Roman? What does it mean to be in Rome? What is Rome? What should Rome be? All these things changed the rhetorical approach that they took over time in Rome, but this is very clearly to me Roman rhetoric, which is there's a thing in your organization where of the organization of your speech called the refutatio, and in that part of your speech you're supposed to bring up the objections to your claim and deal with them in a direct manner that appeals to the audience and shows that these objections, which they might have in their head, I assume Aquinas is talking to highly educated people when he's doing this, I would assume. Some of the best educated people in the world. I don't know if he's out talking to like common folks, but if he's making these kind of theological arguments, he's talking to other educated folks. He would say, now, we all know that this thinker has argued this highly respected thinker has argued this, and he did this rhetorical strategy of stacking the deck against him and then sort of wiping them all out with some kind of cool, like anime-style move, Dragon Ball Z or something like that. Like those before him, Thomas wanted us to know that there already was a debate on the matter, and he insisted we know what the issues in that dialogue were before reading his reply. Okay, so that's a nice charitable read of it, but there's also another read of it, which is they already know this debate. Thomas is recasting that debate in a way that benefits him in some way or shows them a different way to look at it. They're like, oh, that's a very nice summary of that disagreement in scholarship. That's very cool. In effect, he structured the articles to appreciate the debate. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So you're appreciating this exchange in the text by talking about it another way, but that's always sort of a way of predisposing your audience to coming around to a certain view. You wouldn't do it in a way that made it difficult for you unless that difficulty was perceived by the audience, but you already knew the answer. That wouldn't be strategic. After he finally replied, he concluded each article with specific responses to each of the earlier considerations. Each article then invited the reader into deeper discussions and debates about the standing question. So this is kind of a cool way. I mean, maybe that's what he wanted. Maybe that's his goal. That's a cool way to kind of do it, to do the refutatio. But I also think that he probably had a position that he wanted people to accept. And in doing so, he got people to go back and look at those old texts again with this new perspective, which is very cool. Regrettably, due to the way in which neo-scholasticism developed, neo-scholasticism again, always trouble. I don't know what neo-scholasticism is. I just wanted to join Carlo in some like emotion here. In the way neo-scholasticism developed in the subsequent centuries, the search for truth through the style of debate was eventually lost. But it wasn't even really then again, because this isn't really debate. Remember, Aquinas is monologuing here. You could say, and here's a point I'm not quite sure on, so you might have to work with me for a second on this, but can you have a debate across a series of texts? I write a book, you hate it. You write a book talking about how stupid I am. I write a follow-up book talking about how stupid you are, etc. This is like the common kind of academic assumption of what academic work is like. Is that a debate? And I think there's pretty good arguments to say it could be a debate. It's an exchange across the text. Here are these arguments. Here's what's wrong. So it does have some elements that make it a debate. First of all, a set amount of time or set amount of words that are consumed. There are word limits to a book or paper that are material and economic and capitalist and otherwise. When I read that argument, I'm reading it uninterrupted. I could choose to go to the next book and read them side by side if I want to. That is written for an audience to accept, not necessarily for the opponent. Another key element of debate. And the response is also the same. It's like, here's what they said that was wrong. I'm going to choose what to respond to. And also a lot of times they'll do the thing in debate that's difficult to master when you're new at it, which is, what do I have to do to win this in your minds of the audience? What do I have to prove, and what do they have to prove? And I think that's an element that's, so I guess, I don't know, I'm kind of talking myself into thinking that exchanges of books meet my definition of rhetoric, of debate. I think that rhetorically, debate is really best when it's oral. I think that we're moving into what Ong would call, Ong has this book about literary and oral societies, oral cultures, and we're moving into secondary orality. And then reading on the internet might be like tertiary literacy. I don't know what he would say about all of that, but secondary orality is always on my mind, which is now we have YouTube. You're watching me on YouTube. I'm reading this to you and I'm giving kind of a speech about it. I'm giving a lecture about it. It's an oral culture that places the primacy on being able to read in order to engage in speech. That's quite different than an oral culture engaging in debate. So my hang up is, how far do we want to define or create theory about what a good debate is in a society that's experiencing secondary orality and is already a very literate, very highly literate culture that we have? So that's kind of my hang up that I'm thinking about quite a bit. My initial reaction is to say that debate is best theorized as an oral exercise. I don't know if I'm going to hold to that position. Certainly, it doesn't feel like a stretch to say, well, if people are arguing about something across the literature and writing essays about it, that's a debate. They're going back and forth. This back and forth notion is definitely part of our sense of debate, and ought to be part of the theory of debate. If we're going to theorize debate as something that's not a synonym to argument, not a synonym to dialectic, not a synonym to dialogue, which Carlos uses as a synonym for debate, I don't think that's appropriate at all. I totally disagree with that, but I can see why he's doing it, because we just don't have very good debate theory. But I don't think this style of debate was lost, because it's not even really a style of debate. It's a style of inquiry. So if you're talking about debate as a method of inquiry, that's very interesting. But it's still not lost. Debate orally between people who are taking turns and establishing a case for the assent of an audience has always kind of been around. But I think he's saying it's missing in terms of different kinds of intellectual practices. Instead, truth was believed to be crystallized in pithy axioms, valid always and everywhere, someone like Kant's synthetic a priori claims. Okay, I can track with that. I mean, I do think that I think our current political situation is this. The further historical developments of the Enlightenment, the French Revolution, modernism, and the discomfort the church felt with these movements is likely to have contributed to entrenching even more deeply convictions that were based less on wholesome debate and more on pro or contra rallying cries. But I still don't understand what wholesome debate is. Maybe we can put it together. It's this idea of doing a really, really good refutatio or bringing in your opponents, but that's just good rhetoric. So maybe the cry here is we need more rhetoric in our persuasion, in our argumentation, and in our writing. Maybe debate here is a synonym for rhetoric. Maybe that's what he means. I don't know. I do think that that's a great thing to say, but no one's going to defend rhetoric. It's a bad word. But maybe debate's a synonym for rhetoric here, which makes me kind of like his article better. But if we're going to think about it as debate and as a definition of debate, we have to reject it, because we have to say that nothing in here has really seemed to me to be like a debate as an independent kind of discursive form or discursive practice, that would have real, good walls and good lines around it. That would make it different. Like, oh, I'm going to participate in a dialogue because these features of debate are unnecessary for us to get value out of this discursive exchange. And you say, no, we're not going to have a dialogue. Let's have a debate because that's where the value comes. Okay, the current situation. I think it's very funny. A brief genealogy of debate. Oh, my God. And then he's like, here are two authors. Boom, we're done. It's pretty funny. There is a wealth of writing on debate in the field of rhetoric, a huge amount of it. So many interesting books, so many good articles about it, so many thoughtful things about it, how to do it, how it should be practiced, and most importantly, what is the function of teaching debate to people? What's the function? Why would we do that? And also, when we teach it and judge it, how do we know that it's been done well? Huge debate literature. None of this cited here, but again, I mean, that's probably the fault of NCA and the NCA rhetoricians who would rather talk to each other in a Hilton hotel bar than do this kind of outreach that Carlos is doing. So Carlos is already well ahead of anybody in my field in terms of engaging this kind of stuff. No NCA rhetorician would write publicly about debate. How embarrassing. That's just a game that people play on the weekends. I'm much more interested in my QJS article I'm going to talk to you at the bar about. This kind of thing. It's more like student council. Somebody told me that once. Like, NCA is like high school student council. And I was like, yep, that tracks. The current situation. Here we go. We've blasted our way from Aquinas into 2025. Boom. It's a little jarring. That reentry is a little jarring there, Carlo. More than a century and a half down the line, we are hardly in a better place. I don't know. I feel like if we hear an axiom of truth that we don't care for, or we feel our axiom of truths are threatened, we at least have the step of being able to go and look up stuff about it. Now, that's not going to be great because the algorithm of the internet is going to send us to things we already believe. We know that. And confirmation bias is a bitch, and the internet just serves confirmation bias because you can make a lot of money there. When debates are organized, panelists are often handpicked such that one is passionately in favor of an issue and the opponent is staunchly against the same issue. Yes, that's a debate. That's a debate. That's good. In itself, this is the first grave shortcoming since one cannot expect any resolution or common ground. No, you can expect common ground. We both care about the future of children. We both care about the future of education. And we both care about wasted taxpayer money. But I think charter schools are not the way to resolve any of this. And I'll never believe that charter schools are the way to resolve any of this. That's what it sounds like. So Carlo is unfamiliar with the practice of in rhetoric of finding commonplaces. You can't just start and be like, I'm right. I have the truth. I have the facts. That's not how you start. You have to start with connection to the audience. Be like, you came to this debate because you care about things. My opponent cares about the same things. We deeply care about education and student success. But what we disagree about is either, and here's where stasis theory comes in, either the facts of the case, the definition of what a student is or what student success is, the degree at which our competing ideas actually help students or the degree at which students need help, or the policy to do it. I use the example of charter schools. I'm very policy-minded in my approach to creating arguments. I usually go there first because my life in debate has been doing, American policy debate, most of it, and coaching a kind of debate that got corrupted by American policy debate ideas, world's debate, where everyone now has to have a plan and a policy and all that. You can't just debate outside of the stasis of policy. But to expect a resolution of a debate is very silly because the debate is often timed, it doesn't last too long, and there's not enough time or research or investment in it in terms of research to make it really solve the issue. That can take years. So this is an unreasonable expectation, but you can definitely find common ground. We all care about the safety of children. We all care about parental rights. So why do we still allow people to have guns in their home? Why do we do that? And that might be the debate. I think this is kind of a silly thing. If you think a debate that takes place over an hour and a half is going to resolve a conflict like the Second Amendment conflicts or abortion or something, you're very, very halcyon. It's cute, but it's very, very, very naive, I'd say. These are big issues that require a lot to even make a little bit. It's like trench warfare. To even make a little bit of advancement on the policy front, you have to argue and argue and argue and advocate. And debates are one part of that, but debates aren't going to be the linchpin to solve it. There's not a rule in debate where if like somebody can't answer a question, they're like, they won the debate, and then everybody in the audience is like, well, shucks, I have to give up my belief about guns now. Oops, oh well. I have to change my mind. It doesn't work that way. People will say, well, that debate was unfair. Well, the moderator was unfair. Well, that person is a manipulator who was on the other side. There'll be 1,000 excuses. So debates can never do that, but debates do force you to make those excuses. But then at the same time, you're doing that as a defense mechanism for your own ideology, your own understanding, your own belief. And then you might have to go home and think about it for a couple of days and alter the way you articulate your belief, which changes your belief and changes the way others accept it. So it becomes this dust kick up that moves through society in a nice way. When debates are held on an ideological level, what's the other level? What'd be the other level here? Doesn't make any sense. What, the level of fact? It's ideological. One can never see eye to eye. Is that the goal of debate, seeing eye to eye? Why is the assumption here that debate needs to resolve the disagreement between the participants? I don't think that's a necessary element of a good debate. If the audience sees people who will never agree, it might move them to agree with the people in their life, right? If the aim of the debate is not that of honestly seeking the truth, the debate has already failed. No, I disagree completely. The aim of the debate can be a number of different things. It can be, what are the facts out there on this? It can be, who's got the stronger arguments and why? It can be, why do people like these arguments? It can be, I don't even know how you would honestly seek the truth in a debate. You come in with a belief that you think is the truth. Debate tests that. Is that a preconception and perception? How do we arrive at truth? The debate has already failed. That's a very silly thing to say. The debate could be extremely successful if it makes the people in the audience question their own beliefs, which is much more important than arriving at the truth. If you think you have the truth, why would you engage in a debate? You'd be like, well, it doesn't matter what they say. I know the truth. It doesn't matter what the other side says. It doesn't matter. If I'm trying to convince them, why would I engage? Why would I need to raise my voice or shout if I have the truth? I'd be like, well, eventually you're going to get it. You're going to figure it out. You're a smart guy. I don't have to continue this debate. I already know it's true. It's better to try to argue as if you're right for the benefit of everyone involved in the debate. Make the strongest and most persuasive arguments possible. If nothing else, people will say, wow, that argument was so convincing. How did that argument move my convictions so well, even though I know it's not true? And then you get a little bit of this inoculate power against the bad uses of rhetoric out there, or uses of rhetoric that we might call manipulative or shallow or short-sighted. It merely ends up in an exercise of trying to shoot down the opponent's argument. That's what you're supposed to do in a debate, bro. Like, test it. Like, one of the ways I teach debate is I think of it like a lab, like a science lab. Let's do the experiment and test it. If it can't hold up, it can't hold up. We got to think about it again. It doesn't ruin the total conviction. It doesn't disparage the facts. The information that's there for a good case is still there, but you got to figure out how to get around it. Like, he's got no sense that debate is sort of strategic, and that when people make choices or they think they're convinced of the truth, they then have a little bit of an ethical delay or gap or short-sightedness. They're like, well, this is true, so it's okay if I deceive them a little bit. It's okay if I equivocate because I know I'm right, and I know this is the truth, and it's better for them. So then we abandon our ethics of communication because we know we're presenting the truth, and that's bad. Debate shows us how easy that is to do and how easy it is to fall into it. And since we're in a debate and we know it's not, not everything is on the line, we're just watching the test of excellent arguments, then we can learn from that. And when that fails, to denigrate the opponent themselves. Is this how you do it? I hope not. Jesus, that's horrible. That's so stupid. This is not good. This is not a good model. And this is not what debates are. I think maybe I agree with him in the fact he's describing what happens now. This is like Jubilee. This is this kind of stuff. When following such debates, one can sometimes find that the various participants on either side of the debate extend their argument to such extreme positions that they too would not be comfortable with such conclusions. Yeah, but that's okay. I think that's good debate. This is good debate. I mean, I'm kind of torn here because I think he's like attacking the same things I hate, like Jubilee and all this. But the goal of debate is not that. The goal of debate is to see who's got the stronger arguments and then understand what makes that argument strong. Since the debating forum often looks like a gladiator's arena, it would make interlocutors often feel humiliated if they were to admit the limitations of their argument or concede their opponent might be right on. So, yeah, this is the Jubilee model. This is the model that we get on YouTube. But I do find value in extending the debate to extreme positions. I think that's valuable. Because in a debate where the goal is not truth-seeking, the goal is, why do these arguments work? Let's examine them. You've really got something there. And so debate becomes a kind of a performance where you're testing how well one can convince the audience of something, which is very powerful and important. To the inattentive listener who for some reason or other might not be able to critically analyze what is being said, statements made haphazardly in the heat of the moment might easily gain traction. Yeah, this is worth studying. We can't ban this. It must also be acknowledged that because Gen Z has been brought up in such a fluid environment devoid of any fixed points of reference. Wow. What the hell? What the hell? I don't understand that at all. They crave for anything that might serve as an anchor for them to develop a sense of identity. Okay, dude. Have you talked to Gen Z people? They have deep convictions. They have things they stand for. They have things they love. In fact, they're incredibly creative. They're creating all this stuff called brain rot, which is this like weird non-narrative character creation driven thing that I think is very funny and interesting and cool. They also, they do have a sense of, what are you talking about? They have a sense of identity. This is very sad. This is probably why a person who's more direct and vociferous in his or her arguments is less sensitive to nuance, appeals more easily to younger. No, actually, I'd find it the other way around, is that when people argue direct and vociferous, Gen Z calls them a Karen. The nuance and the carefulness are what Gen Z like. They like that. They're very reticent to be like, here's what I believe. They want to be welcoming and open to other people. So I don't know. This is like, this whole paragraph lost me completely. I don't think he's talked to any Gen Z people. What I've described above creates the perfect breeding ground for fundamentalist religiosity and for populism, with all the problematic social effects that this brings with it. I hate to tell you, but populism is always a problem, and it's a problem because we no longer have, and maybe we never had it, that's another debate to have, we no longer have the rhetorical training of how to write and speak in ways that put connection with others first to move them over the truth. So what we teach people to do is, you have the facts and the truth. It doesn't matter how you speak to other people. You know, Ben Shapiro, this is Ben Shapiro's mantra. Facts don't care about your feelings. I think that I would agree with Carlo if what he's saying here is that the bad debate model breeds this stuff. But I think populism is always a problem. But I think we need more rhetorical education, not less. He's saying we need less debate. Or we need a debate that's not a debate. It's almost like Burkean debunking here. I don't know. Maybe I'm kind of talking myself into agreeing with him. Except his Gen Z stuff completely lost me. That's not the Gen Z I encounter. Maybe it's different in Malta. Invite me out there to guest lecture. I'd love to come to Malta. Meet some Gen Z Malta people and be like, hell yeah, Malta's cool. I do think televised debates and media debates are terrible. They're terribly done because they don't have emotion and they don't have uninterrupted time, and they have a moderator asking questions. None of these things are good for debate. These are all very, very bad for debate. Debate is best when it's like, I'm making a case to you, audience. I'm making a case to you, judge. And the other side says, here's what's wrong with the case you just heard. They can't interrupt each other. There might be questioning time, things like that. And that is a good model. But I agree with Carlo if he's saying we do not need the pop culture model of argument we see on YouTube or that we see on the media. I agree with that. But what it seems to me he's saying is that we'd be better off without debates that have strict differences where people go at each other in opposition. I don't agree with that. I think we need that. But I think we don't have the rhetorical training to make that effective. I hope that's kind of clear. But I hate Jubilee, and Carlo does too. So we're in agreement there. Here's what he thinks a wholesome debate should be. Digging deeper. In the Gospels, we often see the Pharisees seeking to trap Jesus in controversy. Is it lawful or not to? Jesus never gives into their scheming. Instead, he invites them to ask themselves more fundamental questions. This sounds like Charlie Kirk's method, right? In his second letter to Timothy, Paul insists that we must preach the word, be prepared in season and out of season, correct, rebuke, and encourage. But he also adds how this is to be done with great patience and careful instruction. All of this is good rhetorical training. Because to preach the word, be prepared in season and out of season, sounds to me like the fundamental principle of rhetoric and rhetorical debating, which is pay attention to the context. Correct, rebuke, and encourage. That sounds great. No, you're wrong about this. I disagree with that policy. I don't think that policy should be advocated. And I encourage you to look into this issue further. But this isn't debating. This is just good rhetorical practice, right? Synodality and bridge building. I don't think I've ever seen the word synodality before. This is because I am a ignorant fool when it comes to religious issues. Well, maybe not Buddhism, but I'm still a novice in Buddhism anyway, too, you know. Throughout his pontificate, Pope Francis retrieved the importance of synodality, a key aspect which includes humble listening to one another, letting go of one's privileged position, and daring to enter the reality of the other person. This is what rhetoric practices. This is what rhetoric is. This is great advice for anybody engaged in what Carlo calls an ideological debate. Because we do have incredibly stark ideological differences in life, and we can't just pretend like they're not there. We should have debates on these things. Pope Leo XIV has shown from the outset he will be following his predecessor by building bridges, especially by healing the wounds of division and polarization. Depolarization is a word that if you put that into your grant proposal, you can print money. Everybody wants a depolarized world. I want a polarized world. I like a polarized world because we can learn more from it if people say, yeah, that's what I believe and I can defend it. Let me make a case instead of what we have now, which is like, I think it's true. Why do you not think it's true? And then you just sit there and deflect all the questions and stuff because you're not open to change your mind. We need a system like rhetorical debating where you're not going to change your mind, that the rubric of it to the audience is who changed their mind. That, you know, who's right. That can't be a rubric. The rubric is, what did you think were the best arguments and why? Because that gets you thinking about how things come across, how connecting to people provides it sets the table for whatever you really want to serve. And that's what makes people fearful of rhetoric, I think. But I think the popes, Pope Francis, Pope Leo XIV, I think both of the popes here have a great idea of how to win a debate. Listen, be humble, communicate to the audience that it's a difficult issue, and explain how you understand how the opposition came to these conclusions. They're not evil and wrong. It makes sense they came to the conclusions, but the conclusions are not acceptable. And Charlie Kirk didn't do that part. If a debate is to be fruitful, it must benefit listeners who want to emerge a bit more enlightened on an issue. Yeah, I agree. But they learn more enlightened. I would say they learn more about the issue and they learn more about why they've come to the position they have, and then they try to defend it more, which is very healthy. A lot of times we just feel like we've accessed the truth. We stop thinking about the issue. We're like, well, that's the right way to think about it. And we don't go out and explore things we've already convinced ourselves that we're right about. The grace of self-doubt, which Margaret Farley describes as one of the least recognized gifts of the Holy Spirit, is essential for interlocutors on any debating panel. Why does he say any debating panel? I think that Carlo and I agree that all the models are bad, but his alternative model has some good and some bad to it. There's things I disagree. This is not a grace for calling into question every fundamental conviction we have achieved. It will not foster it. Well, we don't do that. Only philosophers would do that. What we do is call into question a conviction when the context and the things we're hearing and seeing, the information, pushes against it. Our natural inclination is to double down on being right or triple down on, I'm right. This information is bad. Instead of giving the information the benefit of the doubt and then saying, okay, Do I need to change my view? How can I alter my view to take in this information? That's something rhetoric teaches. It's something rhetoric teaches us to do, and we don't teach rhetoric, so we don't have it. It will not foster doubt, for example, about the dignity of human persons or the trustworthiness of God's promises. It is a grace for recognizing the contingencies of moral knowledge when we stretch towards the particular and the concrete. That's kind of interesting. I wonder if that's related to Kairos. Kind of sounds like the Christian understanding of Kairos. Like the Paul Tillich, the eternal breaking through into the temporal. Isn't that his definition? Recognizing the contingencies of moral knowledge when we stretch towards the particular and the concrete. Yeah. So moral knowledge comes from a place, it's invented and it's constructed as an argument in a particular time and place by particular people facing down a particular world. And then it starts to stretch and break when we try to move it to a very foreign environment. I can track with that. It allows us to listen to the experience of others, take seriously reasons that are alternative to our own, rethink our own last word. It assumes a shared search for moral insight. This is weird. Why is it hyphenated? And it promotes, though it does not guarantee, a shared conviction in the end. Absent such grace, it's not surprising the church's teaching will remain divisive and ineffective, unconvincing to many within the church route. So this is just like, reach out to your audience. Understand your audience comes from a different position than what you think is true, and adapt to them. That's good rhetorical advice. Participating in wholesome debate does not mean one falls into relativism or that one does not challenge, speak truth to power, affirm one's convictions. No, I don't think that this is good. I think that after the debate, you can affirm your convictions in a different way. In the debate, you might represent something that is not your convictions. I'm a big believer that in debate, sometimes people shouldn't recognize they shouldn't represent their own position. They should represent the other side's position because they learn a lot from that. They'll learn quite a bit from that. And also, we'll learn a lot looking at how they think the best arguments of the side they disagree with are best represented. So that would be an interesting. And also it lowers the stakes because everyone knows they're not representing their identity. The big problem we have now is people's politics are their identity, their complete identity. So it's not that you have a wrong thought, it's that you are wrong. You need to be eliminated because you're wrong. There's no, it's not worthwhile or worth my time to try to change your mind. You're evil. And you have to be eliminated. I think that's probably what Charlie Kirk's assassin thought as well. So let's read this again. Participating in wholesome debates does not mean that one falls into relativism or that one does not challenge, speak truth to power, or affirm one's convictions. Yeah, these are separate activities from debate. I think Carlo believes that when you're debating, you're putting your identity on the line as what you believe. That's not the case. You can debate as an exercise, and I think we need to do that more. All Roman education was debate as exercise where you were making arguments of how to appeal to audiences in difficult cases that you were assigned. You didn't really believe in the side that you were representing, but you're like, here's the best argument I can make for this audience in this context in this time. And that's what I teach, and I think that's something that everybody should learn how to do, because if you feel like you have the truth, you're like, well, the facts speak for themselves. The truth will set you free and all this nonsense. What it really means is that it makes you lazy. You do not have to consider how other people think and feel because the truth is the truth, and however they feel or think doesn't matter. You just hit them with it, and then you can be kind of unethical too because the truth is more important than the person in front of you. I think Carlos is worried about that, but that's not what debate is. A good model of debate is not that. I agree with him that the models of debate we're given are terrible. These are all important. However, if debate is to be done well, that is, if truth is to be sought and communicated to others, nope. It ought to not be done by attacking one another, but by walking side by side with others in a joint discussion. This is such a halcyon, naive kind of conclusion. This is a disappointing conclusion. I think you could have a much more robust debate where you have two opposite views that are both definitely persuasive, definitely people believe both things, and then you have the clash. The result of the clash is we can now take what was said in this text of this shared debate, and we can apply it to our own views to see if our views need revision, or if our views need, or now we have a new way to explain it to our friends and family and bring them over to the, because the only reason you have a debate is because you care about people. You care that people are wrong. If you didn't care, you wouldn't have it. So he wants to eliminate debate, is what it said. Let's eliminate debate completely because all the models are bad. No, he just gave a lot of interesting ideas that rhetoric shares when we think about teaching debate. Now, I'm not talking about weekend intercollegiate or high school debate tournaments. Those are pretty bad. But I do think that there's a model of debate in the classroom. There's a model of debate in education. There's a model of debate in civics that could benefit from the things that Carlo here is offering. This is all good rhetorical advice, from people in the Catholic Church, which isn't surprising to me. A lot of rhetoric throughout the history of the church, and a lot of rhetoric developed through people who were connected to the Catholic Church. So in the history of rhetoric, it's not surprising to me to see that. But what's surprising to me is see somebody know all this stuff and then dismiss debates wholly in terms of holding hands and walking together towards the issue. That doesn't make any sense. Like, if truth is to be sought and communicated to others, okay, that's a different challenge than debate. Debate is not about truth-seeking and communicating the truth to others. It's about noticing how we fell into the beliefs that we have, how those arguments work, and whether or not did we take the salience of the argument and put it and give it too much credit in our belief. We need to change our view or alter it in some way, not necessarily change my conviction, but I need to change how I articulate this to reach more people, because that is indeed the goal a lot of people have for belief. But anyway, I hope I wasn't too hard on you, Carlo. I still hope that invitation's coming to come lecture in Malta. I would love that. Again, this is a series of bad takes on debate. Why is this take bad? Because it's debunking. Because we don't have a good model of debate, all models of debate are bad. We should just not have debate at all. We should have instead a discussion. Very common kind of argument. Why is this bad? Because debate is the only form of discursive practice that we have where people represent to a hardcore extreme what they believe and try to really convince the audience in a very raw way, in a very impassioned way that they're right. And the stakes are not solving the issue once and for all. It's pretended to be that. Debates are quite artificial. Look at Monk. Look at Intelligence Squared. Look at DOA debates. It's all very artificial. But it's for the benefit of the people watching the debate to say, I really need to revise my articulation of these things. A lot of times what science shows us and what research has shown us is people hear a controversy, they immediately decide what's right within seconds. And then they spend the rest of the time in conversation justifying that snap judgment. That's the way we are evolutionarily, or however you think. That's how we react to controversy. So if we know this to be a theory that has a lot of clout to it and a lot of good evidence for it, we definitely need debate more then we don't need it, even if there are problems with the model. But there are no problems with the model. We just don't know how to model it. Having a moderator, having people attacking each other personally, having people question each other back and forth is not debate. This is argumentation. This is an aggressive form of dialogue. This is a performance of a nasty civic body, a performance of a toxic civic body, which I often refer to the alien from the Alien films, Ridley Scott, as the toxic civic body. Maybe that should be a video. Maybe I should go into detail on that metaphor. I don't know if you guys would like that. But just because these things exist doesn't mean debate's bad. It just means we're modeling it bad. And I think Carlo Calleja, I think he believes that since it's all bad models, that debate is bad. And that we should just not have debate. We should have this deeper truth-seeking thing that he calls wholesome debate. But it's really not a debate at all. It sounds more like a dialogue. And it's totally fine if you do not want to participate in debate. It's fine. Not a debate absolutist. I don't think you should have to or be forced to be in debates. I don't think that's necessary. I think you can choose, but I do think you should choose the discursive option that best serves the purpose of having that exchange in language with that other person. Sometimes dialogue is it. Sometimes a monologue is it. Sometimes a speech is it. Sometimes a debate is it. But we shouldn't remove one form of discourse and say it's bad just because it's poorly modeled. I think that's where I'll conclude. I'm not going to hold hands and walk into the sunrise talking about truth or anything like that, because I'm just not a big fan of that kind of thing. But my ending will be, don't dismiss a distinctive discursive form just because nobody can model it well. All right, well, this isn't really the podcast, but I do like coming in and out with the music. It's kind of nice. But anyway, if you liked, please like, comment, subscribe, or send me an email. I'll put all that up on the last screen here. And also consider supporting the channel. That's right. Consider supporting the channel. We love it. Any amount goes a long way. All right, see you in the next video. Thank you, guys.
So it is. Let it begin for me. In all that we can see, the light that we can believe. So you see, a love that's lost too deep. The dawn shines down on the sea. A ghost is all